Have you ever noticed something, well, a little strange about some of the most powerful people in the world? Like a recurring, unexplained injury that just seems to pop up again and again? Today, we're going to unpack a term that means two wildly different things. One is born from some very real pain, and the other, well, that one comes from the deepest corners of the internet. So what is the Black Eye Club? It seems like a simple question, right? But the answer is anything but simple. You see, depending on who you ask, it's either a powerful symbol of survival or it's a terrifying sign of a global, sinister pact. So let's start peeling back the layers. All right, the very first thing we have to get our heads around is that we are not just talking about one club. The name has been claimed by two completely separate, totally different worlds. Okay, so in one corner, you've got art that's imitating life. The Black Eye Club is an award-winning play, a really poignant black comedy about survivors of domestic abuse who are finding solidarity together. And then in the other corner, you have this sprawling internet conspiracy theory that claims the world's elite are all part of a secret society, and a black eye, that's their membership card. The play itself is grounded in a really harsh reality. Its writer, Phil Charles, was actually inspired to write it after he saw vital support services for abuse victims getting their funding cut. It's a story about human resilience in the face of systemic failure, a very real, very tangible club that, let's be honest, nobody ever wants to join. But then there's the other version, the one that lives and breathes in online forums and social media threads. And this is the one we're really going to dive into today. This belief system that sees a hidden and often violent story playing out just behind the public faces of power. So how does a theory like this even take hold? Well, it gets its power, its juice, from cataloging all these high-profile people who have suddenly appeared in public with a black eye, usually, and this is key, around the left eye. And the list of so-called members is a real who's who of global influence. Popes, presidents, politicians, celebrities, you name it. Now, for every single injury, there's an official and often kind of mundane explanation. George W. Bush choked on a pretzel. Pope Francis bumped his head on the Popemobile. But for the people who believe in this theory, these explanations are just a little too convenient, a little too weird. Here's the core claim. These are not random accidents, not at all. Instead, they're seen as signs. Maybe a sign of a ritual initiation into a secret group like the Illuminati. Or maybe it's a mark of punishment, a visible warning to a member who stepped out of line. And then, well, things get much, much weirder. One of the most extreme branches of the theory is something called soul scalping. The idea here is that the black eye is actually the result of some kind of non-human parasite. They sometimes call it a real parasite, entering the brain through the eye socket to take over the human host. The original person is just gone, replaced by a vessel serving some hidden agenda. Then you've got this other incredibly detailed story from a man named Donald Marshall. He claims that the global elite are all part of a REM-driven cloning subculture. So in this version, when a celebrity goes into REM sleep, their consciousness gets transferred to a clone body in a secret lab somewhere. The black eye, then, is an injury that the clone got, which then somehow shows up on the original person's body. You know, as absolutely wild as these ideas sound, the concept of a marked eye being linked to power or secret knowledge, that is anything but new. This theory is actually tapping into some of our oldest myths and symbols. And these archetypes are just so powerful. In ancient Egypt, you have the god Horus, who loses his left eye in a battle. And when it's restored, it becomes this huge symbol of healing and royal power. In Norse mythology, Odin literally sacrifices one of his eyes to gain cosmic wisdom. He's trading physical sight for a kind of inner sight. Even the Masonic Eye of Providence symbolizes a higher, all-seeing watchfulness. This idea is deeply, deeply embedded in our cultural DNA. And this timeline, wow, it really shows how this core idea has evolved over time. We have always been fascinated with the idea that someone's inner corruption or a secret allegiance leaves a physical mark on their body. From the Greek stigma that branded criminals, to the devil's mark that witch hunters were looking for, to the modern-day theorist who's scrutinizing high-def photos, it's the same ancient impulse, just armed with today's digital tools, searching the body for proof of a hidden reality. Okay. So what do we have? We have a collection of random accidents, a whole set of ancient myths, and a deep human history of looking for physical tells. So what's the cognitive engine that connects all these different dots into one huge conspiracy? Well, the answer might just be hardwired right into our brains. There's actually a scientific term for this. It's called apophenia. It's our human brain's tendency to see patterns and find meaning, even where there's just random noise. It's the reason we see faces in the clouds or think we hear messages in static. Our brains are just pattern-seeking machines. And you know what? This isn't a bug, it's a feature. This tendency, which was identified by a psychiatrist named Klaus Conrad way back in 1958, was actually crucial for our survival. Think about it. The ancestor who assumed that the rustle in the grass was a predator, even when it was just the wind, was way more likely to survive than the one who always assumed it was the wind. It's better to see a pattern that isn't there than to miss one that is. But here's the catch. In our modern world, we are just flooded with an infinite amount of information. And our ancient survival software, well, sometimes it can misfire. It can take a handful of totally unrelated celebrity injuries, spread out over decades in continents, and weave them into a single, compelling, and, yeah, potentially completely imaginary story. But wait, just when you think you have a neat, tidy, psychological explanation for all of this, the source material for this explainer throws us one final, absolutely mind-bending twist. What if the explanation itself is part of the conspiracy? Check out this quote. It comes from a dystopian story that completely flips the script. It imagines a world where a secret group maintains its power, specifically by promoting the idea of apophenia. So, in this story, meaningful coincidences, what some people might call synchronicity, are actually real. They're like messages from the universe trying to guide humanity toward enlightenment. But this shadowy, dark council, they see this empowerment as a huge threat to their control. So get this. In this story, the council's greatest weapon is psychology. They take the concept of apophenia and they weaponize it to discredit real patterns. They teach the entire world that any meaningful connection you see is just a flaw in your brain's wiring, a trick of the mind. And this keeps everyone doubtful, disconnected, and a whole lot easier to control. And this brings us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? We have the very real story of trauma and survival in the play. We have a massive conspiracy theory built on patterns people think they see. We have a scientific explanation for why we see those patterns. And now, we have a fictional story that suggests the scientific explanation is itself a conspiracy. It just goes to show you that our search for meaning, our search for patterns, is this fundamental human drive. We look for it in art that helps us process real-world pain. We look for it in huge theories that try to make sense of a chaotic world. We use science to try and understand the very mind that's doing all the searching. And then we use fiction to question whether our science even has it right. And that's really the question I want to leave you with. The next time you spot a strange pattern, a weird coincidence, what lens are you going to use to look at it? Is it a genuine, meaningful connection? Is it just your ancient brain doing what it evolved to do? Or just maybe, is the very idea that it's all just a trick of your mind the most sophisticated trick of all?